Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for watching today's session on how to beat an ATS, which stands for Applicant Tracking System. We're going to talk about creating your perfect resume. My name is Shannon Amaral. I'm the Career Services Program Specialist here at Fanshawe College. I work in the Employment and Student Entrepreneurial Services Department. You can find us located in D Block 1063. In this workshop today, you're going to discover exactly what an applicant tracking system is and why it's so important to your resume. So what exactly does an ATS stand for? Applicant Tracking System is basically a software system that provides recruiting and hiring tools for companies. An ATS software is basically a powerful database program in recruitment that helps to manage hiring processes and screen in potential candidates. It does so by organizing applicant information in the most convenient order for all recruitment needs. It allows hiring managers to define applicant skill, qualifications, and employability much easier and faster. If you are applying, let's say, to a large organization, chances are you'll face an ATS tracking system. If you're applying through any online form, you're most likely applying through an ATS tracking system. Even job sites like Indeed and LinkedIn have their own built-in ATS. Today, our Career Services is going to be sharing some essential things that you should know about the applicant tracking system and how this can help you make that perfect resume application to get selected for those desired interviews. So how do you increase your score? A few things we're going to talk about today is number one, it will be keywords. 2, job titles. 3 is degree. 4 is resume format and structure. So luckily, getting past an ATS is a lot easier than you may think. You just need to follow these steps to create what we like to call an ATS-friendly resume to impress those hiring managers. So what are the most important factors when it comes to getting a strong match score? Number one is going to be the keywords. So you need to make sure that the most prominent keywords, or what we like to use as buzzwords, from that job description are front and center in your resume. So that means looking at those skills that are listed in that job description and highlighting all those particular skills that their employers asking for and making that front and center into your resume and cover letter. Number 2 is job titles. So let's say with an ATS is going to be looking for applicants that have the same or obvious, titles. So let's say you're applying for a job as a marketing manager, and let's say you are one, but however, your company calls you a content manager instead. So as long as it's honest to do so, you may want to consider changing your title on your resume to read marketing manager. That would only make it easier for the system to understand your job and to give you a much larger score within an ATS tracking system. Number 3 is degree. If the job that you're looking for states that it requires, let's say, a bachelor's degree and you don't have one, I wouldn't apply through that job through an ATS or through an online application process, because you may not be getting that strong score in terms of meeting that score for that particular position. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't be applying for that job. You just may need to find another way to get the intention of that particular organization if you haven't met the education requirements. And number 4 is going to be your resume format and your structure. So we talk about resume format and structure. An ATS is going to have a difficult time reading your resume if you go too far outside the box in terms of your structure. So that means your fonts that you use, the graphics that you have, and even a photo. So you're going to basically want to make sure you're playing it very safe when it comes to creating a resume for an ATS platform. So you can't have all those bells and whistles. You may need to consider having 2 versions of your resume if you are somebody that is wanting to apply online for jobs. So we touched on this a little bit earlier about using keywords from that job description. So it's very common for those recruiters to filter through resumes on an applicant tracking system by searching for key skills and titles. So let's say, for example, if a recruiter is looking to hire, let's say for an administrative assistant positions, and they happen to receive 400 resumes, the first step will probably be to search for the job title, administrative assistant. This will then isolate candidates that don't have that exact job title. Anyone that doesn't have that exact title in their resume may be out of luck. However, some recruiters also do what they like to call, they contain multiple terms. So for example, recruiters might want to perform a more complex search that contains a combination of titles and skills that are really important to that job. So let's say administrative assistant, that could also be data entry, that could be payroll as well. So the best way to figure out the skills and the keywords to use is to really making sure that you are analyzing that job description. It's so important to read through that job description very carefully and clearly, because it's the main source that contains the most relevant keywords. So make sure you include as many keywords as possible, make a list of all the skills that you have and the background that perfectly matches all the requirements that are listed. And research is going to be the key to success. In order to get obviously more details about, let's say, the company's culture and a more detailed job description, you may also have to visit the company's website as well. We also want to make note that in some cases, an ATS is scanning for keywords that only recognize the exact matches. So you want to be careful in terms of using certain words. And one example we can give you is, let's say, for example, you're a personal support worker. There's an abbreviation for personal support worker. It's PSW. So you want to make sure that you're spelling out the full word, because it may not always recognize those keywords that you're putting as a point form. So just make sure you're writing out all the full words. You can always, to be safe, you can write out the full name and maybe put in brackets the actual word. So maybe say personal support worker and then in brackets PSW. So just be careful with those particular words and don't use just abbreviations. Write out the whole word as well. So we are going to talk about a few things. So with an ATS tracking system, it gets a bad reputation as being robots with artificial intelligence standing between you and those desired jobs. Human resources and even recruiters are only receiving about 25% of applications because most of the applicants are not qualified for the job that they're trying to fill. If you're looking, let's say, for an entry-level position, let's say an accounting position, and you're seeing someone who is a dentist or an engineer, it's totally fair for an ATS tracking system to most likely not necessarily look at those applications. So the first thing you want to talk about is, do apply for roles that you're only qualified for. So you need to make sure that you are truly qualified for the roles that you're applying for. This doesn't mean that you have to obviously check off every single qualification for that job, but you need to make sure that you have the core skills needed to be able to perform that job. And you're better off not wasting the time of the recruiters or, being upset at yourself that you haven't heard back from that particular employer. The other thing we want to talk about is don't be applying for too many roles within the same company. So consider removing previous applications if you've applied to another position at that company. Some ATS tracking systems will compile all the contents that you submitted from your previous application into your new application. If you're applying for every single opening at that same company or one of its departments, a recruiter won't be able to tell if you're actually interested in that particular role. So it's okay to apply for multiple roles if the positions are considered similar. But in generally, you should not be applying for both an entry-level position and a manager-level position, and let's say a sales position, and possibly a video editing position, because you should not be applying for every single opening that the company has. This just shows that you haven't taken the time to show them that you are the right candidate for that role. And a recruiter isn't likely to take the time to go for that either. So even if you have the skill set that is mentioned in that job, it just looks like you're not sure what you want to do. And it definitely may raise some red flags for those particular employers. So just make sure that when you're applying for jobs that you truly feel you have that right skill set for that particular position. And lastly, you do not want to leave off dates of employment. So don't forget to add your employment dates. And the reason being is that an ATS will screen through your resume based on your experience, and that includes the dates. So that is definitely a required field for that job posting. Some major ATS tracking systems like JobVite and Talio, might have their format as being like month year. So for example, 03-2011. Some other ATS will accept the format as writing out the word like March 2011. So just make sure that you always have your dates indicated in your application as well, just to make sure that you're being screened in properly. Here's a sample. What we're showing you today is a sample of a chronological style resume. You can see it's very clean and a very simple format. As job seekers and as students, it's typically understandable that there's always some sort of a barrier standing between you and the jobs that they see. So there's three main resume formats. The first one you're looking at now, as I said, is the chronological style resume. There's also a functional resume, and there's a third option, which is called a combination resume. Of the three I've just mentioned, the chronological one, the one that you're seeing now, is the safest bet, as no ATS tracking system is going to have problems being able to articulate that particular resume style. So please, if you do currently have a resume, hopefully you're getting the point across. We will continue to discuss things to consider, but with an ATS technology, it's come a long ways over the recent years. It's still far from being perfect, and some companies are still using old technology, but knowing what you need to do to make sure you have that, compliant, user-friendly ATS resume formatted is going to go a long way. So again, the one that you're seeing is most commonly used resume. So have a look at what's here. I will also provide, you can provide yourself a copy of this particular resume style. There is a handout that's available. You can access this through your FOL account under resources, and you can click on a toolbox kit, and you'll be able to see a resume and cover letter tip sheet that does give you some more explanation on a chronological style resume. Other things we're going to talk about is if you plan to use any graphics on your resume, you're going to want to remove them, especially if you're planning to apply through an online job board. So if you're using any graphics, let's say graphs, photos, logos on your resume, and you plan to apply through any job using an online application process, you need to remove them. Or like I said earlier in the workshop, or create a second resume with all those extras. Hopefully you're getting the clear point by now with all those little pieces of flair. They don't work well with an applicant tracking system. And it's not just talking about applicant tracking system. Chances are you're going to minimize your chances for success. So we're just going to talk about a few things to consider. So columns, if you have any columns in your resume, since an ATS is programmed to read left to right, some will read columns straight across rather than reading one column from the top to the bottom and then starting on column 2 at the top. So you want to be careful if you have any columns in your resume. Headers and footers. Information in headers and footers sometimes gets dropped by an ATS tracking system completely. So make sure that all your text is within the document body. So if you're somebody who has your contact information in the header, you're going to want to consider removing that and make sure your contact information is in the content body of your resume. The other thing we want to talk about is uncommon section headings. So stick to the labels that we're used to seeing. So education, experience, highlights of qualifications. You want to make sure you stick to the most, conventional labels that the system is used to seeing. We want to talk about hyperlinks on important words. Some systems will display only the URL and drop the words you linked it from. So don't link from anything important, let's say like a job title or accomplishment. Instead, you want to paste it in the URL itself or link it out in a word like website or portfolio. We're going to talk about using less common fonts. So stick to the most universal fonts like Arial, Times Roman, Garmin, Cambria, just to name a few. On the next slide, we'll talk a little bit more about fonts. Extra spacing between words. I know we talked about this a little bit into the workshop, but ATS is really picky about keywords. So a few on the top of an ATS, including, let's say, bullhorn or greenhouse, will not even recognize the multi-word if you're using a hyphen or you'll have any form of separation. So just be really careful when you are putting spaces between words. So we talked a little bit about fonts on the other screen, but it's completely understandable that you want to make sure you choose a resume font that obviously expresses and reflects your personality. But when it comes to using fonts, you want to stick to the fonts that are very common, which is listed on the screen here. So Times Roman and Garmin are very common PC fonts. Arial are considered more like modern or more contemporary fonts, but do try to stick to the fonts that are listed at the bottom of the screen. Anything else could make things a little bit more messy in terms of uploading your resume to an online profile. When we talk about underlining, you want to stick to using underlines in headings and for URLs. Obviously, in general, people have been trained to use underline within sentences as links, so just keep that in mind. When it comes to colors, just so that you know, an ATS will return all the text in the same color. So just make sure that your color choices aren't so vital into understanding the text of your resume. When we talk about bullets, so bullets within your resume, because your resume always is listed as bullet. It's not full sentences or paragraphs. Everything's listed in bullet points. So when it comes to bullets, it's really important to make sure that you stick to the most conventional ones, which would be the circles and square ones. Anything else could get really, really messy as well. So just keep that in mind when you are trying to make sure that your resume is readable to humans and most importantly within an ATS tracking system. The next few slides, we're going to talk about tools for optimizing your resume. So every ATS system is different. There's no way to be sure if your resume is going to pass the test, but there's a few ways that you can check for problems. So we kind of like to say, buckle up, we're going to get a little bit technical here. So one way you can do so is going into Microsoft Word, copying and pasting the content from your resume into a plain text document. Or you can convert your current resume document into a plain text document by obviously clicking Save As and then changing the format to .txt instead of the regular .docx. If the new version is missing any important details from the original, or the characters look different or distorted, then the original format is probably not compatible within an ATS tracking system, and you'll need to form that differently. So that's just one quick way that you can try to see how your resume is going to pass the test. You can also try uploading your resume onto an online ATS scanner. There are plenty of free ones out there. You just want to make sure that you're being cautious to make sure that it's a reputable site before giving away any of your personal information. Now that you want to have a better understanding with an ATS, digest your resume, you want to be sure to check out, let's say, JobScan or Cultivated Culture. It's like an ATS simulation. So you can paste or upload your resume into one box. And on the other box, you can copy and paste the job description and then click hit scan. And within a couple moments, you'll be able to see a percent match of how your role is in comparison to what you're applying for. And it will give you an idea as to how much of a strong score you have. So that's another tool. On the next screen, we'll give you some examples of other online tools that you can use. So here's a few that are listed here. We mentioned JobScan, Cultivated Culture, LinkedIn has their own. So there are several other ones that we don't have listed here. But what is listed here for you is just ones that our office have found most helpful. If you are wanting to use some of these scanning tools, you either need to go in incognito or private mode, as it may help you in not being cut off from free scans. So you may need to be able to use this beyond that free trial purpose. This could also be a great option for you if you want to use this tool on an ongoing basis without some costs. So definitely check out some of these websites as well and see which one you find most helpful for yourself. The other thing we want to talk about is follow the instructions. So whatever instructions are given throughout the application process, you need to make sure you follow them. If they're asking for your documents to be in a particular format, then you need to make sure you use that format. If they tell you they want a cover letter, then give them a cover letter. You don't want to put, see that information in my cover letter in your resume. If the info is called for it, spell it out again. The more closely you follow the instructions, the more likely you are to get past the ATS tracking system and getting through that next stage of the hiring process. If the listing asks for a particular file, give it to them and take that posting's word for it. If it states a PDF, then it's okay to upload a PDF as well. One thing we do want to mention is if you don't have Microsoft Word or you have another program that can convert your resume to a .docx or .pdf, you can also use Google Docs to create your resume and then download it into either format for free as well. But just don't forget to proofread your resume numerous times. The other thing we want to talk about is being an active job seeker. So you shouldn't be applying for jobs through the applicant tracking system 100% of the time, even if you've optimized your resume through an ATS tracking system, because you stand a reasonable chance of passing through it. You're still at a disadvantage versus another candidate who gets that direct attention from a recruiter or hiring manager. So just remember that if there is any personal contact, personal contact does get those referrals as well. So, definitely reach out. Don't just be applying for jobs 100% through online job boards. Make sure that you're being proactive and leveraging those connections. And let's say if you happen to know somebody that is, that has that works at somewhere, reach out to that particular individual, ask them for certain opportunities. We always want to recommend that you stay active and leveraging your connections. So whether it's your first degree connections, your second degree connections, you want to make sure that you're always making those mutual contacts. The second point we want to talk about is it's hard to make yourself appeal to somebody at another company. There's always a lot of ways that you can achieve that. And one of the ways is to ask for what we like to call we always recommend an informational interview. And what an informational interview is, it's basically not to ask for a job. It's more to ask about how someone got to where they got. So one way that you might do so is you might want to contact someone and say, I'm really interested in what you're doing, and I'm interested in maybe going into this field, or I'm interested in working for this company. May I spend 15 minutes on the phone with you talking a little bit about your job? Or you can reach out and find people that work in that particular industry or companies that you're interested in, and ask if you can connect with them, introduce yourself to them. It's really crucial that you understand that it's people who decide on who they're going to hire. So make sure you're making those personal connections. Like I said, don't be spending 100% of your time applying through online job boards, because 80% of jobs are found through personal contact and networking. So make sure that you're out there being proactive, making those connections, ask for those informational interviews as well. And if you know somebody that works at that company, connect with them, see if you have a more direct way of applying to those particular roles. Next, we're going to talk about social media and ATS. So with your social media profile, it can help you, your job, it can help you with your job search. But since an ATS uses social media to search for potential employees, how does that work exactly? Certain ATS system softwares have the ability to search through social channels for keywords. So make sure you update your profiles with those common keywords from that job industry that you are interested in, as well as your work experience. You might be contacted for a job, so make sure that you're looking for those keywords in your industry. Follow individuals that are in that industry, look up those profiles on LinkedIn and find out what keywords they're using, and put those front and center in your resume and in your online profiles to get those strong matches. This brings us to our very last screen. Here is a list of all our career services consultants. As full-time students, you have access to a career consultant. You can connect with your consultant by email. Appointments are available in person, virtually, over the phone, by email, however method you would prefer. To connect with your consultant, send them an email. The list just shown here provides you the names, the emails, and the schools that they represent. So locate your academic school and you'll be able to connect with your career consultant for additional support. Just remember, Fanshawe, we're here for you. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. Take care.